Church, that is incredible, amen? I'm so thankful that the Fakes are a part of our church and for everything that they're doing. And, for someone who doesn't like to speak, she just hit everything right there. That's like way better than anything I have to say today, okay? Go ahead, go home, go to your Super Bowl parties, right? Well, my name's Nick Goelz, and I'm one of the teaching pastors here at FBCW, and I am really glad I'm here this morning. Can I just share something personal with you guys that has nothing to do with the message? Is that okay? I've had a little bit of a tough week. I found out last weekend that a family member of mine that's been battling cancer is terminal, that there's not going to be anything more that the doctors can do. And the really hard part about this news is that I haven't had much of a relationship with this person for a couple of years. And so it's been very challenging this week trying to figure out how I'm supposed to process this. But this morning, being here with my church family and getting to stand here with you guys and sing and hear all of you sing about the victory that our God has already won, I'm so thankful for this family right here. And here's what I know. I know that there are other people around us that we see every day that need that same kind of hope in their lives. And so that's why we're in this sermon series called Be the Church. Because Jesus has looked at us, his followers, this family, and has said that you are the light of the world. And our light isn't going to do any good if we just keep it here in the building. So we've been talking the last few weeks about how to let our light shine. We've looked at letting our light shine by being compassionate, by meeting needs. Last week we were here and we looked at how we're supposed to love each other well here in this community. But today we're going to look at letting our light shine by being a good neighbor. Being a good neighbor. So when I say that, when I say a good neighbor, who comes to mind? Who do you think of? Good, shout it out. Who do you think of? I heard it. Mr. Rogers. Yes. Mr. Rogers. Right? He was incredible. It was always a beautiful day in the neighborhood with Mr. Rogers. I'm not going to sing the song. But he invited us into his living room every week, and he taught us what it meant to be loving, to be caring. What about this guy? Jake from State Farm. Huh? Khakis? Look, State Farm is not a sponsor of our church or of this message. But what's their motto? Not the discount double check, as much fun as that is. But they say, like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. What they're communicating to us is that a good neighbor is there, is present, cares about people, especially when they're going through tough times. But here's my favorite neighbor, Wilson from Home Improvement. This is the only time it's appropriate for a neighbor to peek over a fence like this, okay? As if they're giving you really good advice. Wilson was incredible. No matter how much trouble Tim got himself into, he always had a neighbor, a friend that would come and listen to him and speak into his life. These are all incredible people. But what about Christians? Do we immediately think of Christians as someone that's who we want to live next to? Because when I look into pop culture and I was searching for a good Christian neighbor, this is the only guy I could find. Ned Flanders from The Simpsons. If you've never seen the show, that's okay. And if you have seen it and you're mad at me for putting it up here, I'm sorry. But Ned was not a great neighbor. Unless his plan was to annoy somebody into heaven, he wasn't making an impact in his neighborhood. So what we want to look at this morning is we want to ask ourselves this question. Am I a good neighbor? Am I a good neighbor? And so to help us think about this and help answer this question, we're going to have some fun and we're going to do a little pop quiz. Because there's nothing more fun than a quiz, right? But before you groan too much, I know that everybody in here has spent too much time on Facebook doing like a what spirit animal am I quiz. So this one's not that bad, okay? We're going to do this together. So let's see how we do. Go ahead and put up the first question. Which best describes your interaction with your neighbor? They're like family. I say hello when I see them. I don't know their names. I have a neighbor? That's news to somebody here. All right. How about the next question? Your neighbor asked to borrow a cup of milk because it's the 1950s. Do you A, talk for 20 minutes before you even get to the kitchen, catching up, seeing how they're doing? Do you try to pass off that almond milk that has been in the fridge for months? Or I don't answer the door when strangers knock. That's why I have the Ring doorbell, right? Next question. We doing okay so far? Okay. You see a neighbor struggling to get her groceries and her toddler out of the car. Do you offer to help carry the groceries while she gets her child? Feel her pain, but walk away? Or pull up a chair and watch? It's amusing to see a mom in distress. Now listen, I'm not going to judge you guys from up here, but if you answer C to that question, please see a staff member after service, okay? All right, next question. Your neighbor's grass is consistently about knee-high and overrun with weeds. Some people just went, yep. Do you A, mow their grass for them when you're mowing yours? That's great. Leave cards for lawn care companies in their door, on their windshield, or in their mailbox? Or contact the HOA? Not good, guys. B or C is not okay. All right, and finally, a new person moves into your neighborhood. Do you avoid them at all costs? You have too many friends already, and they could be a serial killer for all you know. Peek through the blinds when your neighbor goes over to meet them, watching for signs of serial killer behavior. You go, Karen. You go first. Or stop by, introduce yourself. That's great. Invite them over for dinner. Very good. During dinner, ask questions that are subtly designed to determine whether they are a serial killer. Okay, there is no good answer there for number 5, okay? Well, hopefully we did okay on that, but there's still some work to be done to answer our question. Am I a good neighbor? And it's an important question, and we're asking it at the right time. See, it's February now. We're kicking off our month of missions. Taking the word of Jesus and the work of Jesus to the world is important to us 12 months out of the year. But you're going to see we have a heavy focus of it for the next few weeks as we set ourselves up for the year. But the cool thing is this. Everybody in here is already in a mission field. You already have a mission field when you're in your home and in your driveway and when you see your neighbors out for a walk. You're already called a missionary. And the best way to have a missional mindset is to just be a good neighbor. So if Jesus says something, it's probably important, right? We'd all agree on that. It is important. And one of his good friends, Matthew, one of his followers, he wrote down the life of Jesus and recorded a lot of great things he said and taught, and that's why we have Matthew in the New Testament. And so in Matthew chapter 22, where we're going to be, what's going on is the religious leaders, they're trying to trap Jesus. They're trying to trick him into doing something wrong because they're fed up with him. He's taken away their popularity and they're done with it. So one of these Jewish leaders asks him, okay, Jesus, which is the greatest commandment? See, they're trying to get him to say this one's more important than all the rest and get him in trouble. But watch how Jesus answers in chapter 22, verses 37 through 40. He said to them, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the greatest and most important command. And now this wouldn't have been anything new to the people he was talking to. They would have known Deuteronomy 6:5 that says just this, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. They would have known it like we know John 3:16 today, for God so loved the world that he sent us his son. And they would have known that they would have known this because in Deuteronomy it told them, hey, imprint these words on your heart, write them in the walls of your home, teach your kids. But Jesus continues. He says, the second is like it. The second is just as important. Love your neighbor as yourself. All of the law and the prophets depend on this. That second part, love your neighbor, they would have known that too. They would have known that in Leviticus 19:18. It says, love your neighbor as yourself. Think of your neighbor as equal to you. It wasn't anything new, but what Jesus was telling them is, look, if you just obey these two things, if you can pour everything you have into these two things, you'll fulfill all of it. Paul would write in Romans that love fulfills the law. And you can read through the commandments and you can see that if you really love your God, if you love your God with everything you have, well, you won't keep any other idols. You won't have any other gods. You won't use his name in vain. You'll set apart time every week for rest and for worship of him because you love him. And if you really love your neighbor, well then you're not going to steal from them. You're not going to lie about them. You won't covet what they have. You won't commit adultery. You won't murder. See, being a good neighbor is easy. Don't murder anybody. Of course, there's a little more to it. See, Jesus says to love your neighbor. And last week we talked about loving each other, and that is so important because we want this to be attractive to anybody who's not yet a part of the family, so that's important. But Jesus would say in Matthew chapter 5 that if you only greet your brother and sister, what are you doing out of the ordinary? What's actually different in your life? Love is out of the ordinary. Love is unexpected. And treating your neighbor how you would treat yourself is incredible. But the story continues, and we can read about it in Luke chapter 10, because Luke went a little bit further with this story than Matthew did. And the religious leader, he comes back to Jesus and he says, okay, who's my neighbor? See, he's looking for that box to check. He's looking for that qualifier. Who, Jesus, do I actually have to love? And then Jesus tells this incredible story about the Good Samaritan. And we're not going to have time to read through it. You can read through it this week. But to kind of paraphrase the story Jesus tells, he talks about a man who's walking down the street when a group of guys jumps out and they beat him up. They steal his wallet, his keys, leave him there to die on the side of the road. And sometime later, a pastor comes walking along and sees the man there in hell, but he crosses the street and continues heading to church. A little bit after that, a deacon comes walking along. He's been part of the church for a long time. He sees this man needs help, but he's got to get to church, and he continues on. A little bit later, a well-known atheist comes walking down the road. This person doesn't believe in a God. He doesn't really care about people all that much either, but yet he sees this person sitting there in need of help, and he runs over to him without any regard for his own safety. He doesn't know if this guy has any disease or if the robbers are still waiting to jump him too. He just jumps right in. He takes him to a hotel, pays for his stay so he has time to rest. And Jesus tells the story and he says, which one of these do you think acted like a neighbor? And the sad truth is that a lot of us have probably seen neighbors act more like the first two in the story. But Jesus said it was the one who showed mercy. The one who loved was the neighbor. And this was such an important lesson that Jesus was trying to teach. See, he was talking to people who were very similar to their neighbors. These Jewish people, they lived in the same kind of houses next to somebody who believed the same things as them, whose day looked the same as theirs. But Jesus knew that wouldn't always be the case. He knew he'd be speaking to Central Florida in 2020. Our neighbors don't always look just like us or act just like us. You might have very different beliefs, a very different background than the person living next to you. But God has put you there for a reason. He's put you there for a purpose to show people that his love is for everyone. Even if they don't talk like you or sound like you or act like you. Your neighbors need to be loved. So how do we become a good neighbor? How do we do this? Well, the first way in your notes is we are going to develop friendships. Develop friendships. And can we just admit that this was way easier when we were kids? Right? I watch my daughter show up to a playground. If there's another kid there, they're best friends immediately. Right? It's not oh, let's see if we get along. Let's try this thing out. It's just, you're here, I'm here, let's rock. Right? They're best friends. Adults, we worry more than that. We tend to think, oh, one more friendship, that's one more relationship I have to be responsible for. People are needy. Or we think, hey, it might be awkward if I have to go introduce myself. It might be embarrassing. It might be. It might be awkward at first. It might be hard. But we're called to do the hard things. But I know how hard it can be. When our neighbors moved in next to us, a couple moved in next door to us, we didn't run over immediately and introduce ourselves. And a week went by. And a month went by. And a year went by. And I didn't know the names of the people living next door to us. I said hi every once in a while. That's as far as it went. And then I started to think, well, I've probably waited too long. That window of opportunity has passed. We're just going to have to be like this till we die. Or they move out. So one day I'm out cutting the grass, and I got my headphones in and listening to music, and I see them out walking their dog, and I finally just said, enough is enough. Took my headphones out, and I just stepped in front of them, and I said, hey, this is really awkward. I'm Nick, and I should have done this a year ago. How are you? And they just laughed. And they said, yeah, we should have done the same thing. And we talked for about a half an hour in our driveway. I grabbed Rachel, and we got to know them a little bit. Just to think that awkwardness lasted all of 4 seconds. And it was so comforting to know that they had felt the same thing and that they also wanted that relationship. But it's so funny to watch people, we put in so much effort to intentionally avoid our neighbors. I've watched people check their mail at like 11 o'clock at night so they don't have to see anybody. Or sometimes people pull in the driveway and they pretend to talk on the phone until they get to the front door. That might actually just be people trying to avoid me, I'm not sure. Take that for what it's worth. We need to be intentional about conversations, about creating relationships with the people that are closest to us. So in light of that, we all have some homework. That's right, pop quiz and homework. Tell me this isn't the most fun you've ever had at church. But if you look in your bulletins, on the second page, there are 9 empty boxes. Those represent 9 homes. What you can do is in that center box, write down your name. That represents your home. And then when you get home this week, I want you to look at the rest of these, and can you fill in the homes around you? Can you fill in their names or something about them? And if you can't, there's the homework. Now, I don't do this to you guys to make you feel guilty. I don't want you to just come to church, get a guilt trip, and then go out for lunch. I want us to be challenged. And I want us to have a goal to work towards. Because I've been challenged this week. See, when we were talking about this message, Pastor Chuck, he got up on the whiteboard and he wrote his 9 boxes, and he was able to tell me like the genealogy of all of his neighbors. And at first I wanted to say, well, it's because he's a lead pastor. He's got some kind of neighbor superhero power. That's not the case. He's just invested, and he cares about the people around him. So I was challenged because I sat down with my 9 boxes and I realized that the people that took me a year to introduce myself to was the best I was doing. I'll show you. Here's my 9 boxes. So there in the middle, you can see that's us. And not to brag, but I can usually name everybody in that house on the first try. Okay? Next to us is Mark and Carly. They're the ones we know really well. They're Gator fans, great people, obviously. The other side of us, well, I know they're from Seattle, and they have excellent Christmas decorations. Like, we didn't even put ours up this year. We were just like, look through the window. Theirs are great. Behind us is a family, and I know they can see directly into my backyard and my swimming pool, so that's probably my next priority of people I need to meet. And then it kind of just goes downhill from there. I know Jason over in the corner, but I don't know his family. Some of these other houses, I know the one has dogs, or maybe just a dog. It sounds like multiple dogs. And I use alleyways and streets and things like that as excuses to not meet the others. I don't want us to feel guilty this morning. I'm saying that because I don't want to feel guilty this week. But I want to be challenged. I want to work towards having the same kind of neighbor map that Chuck has because it's worth it. It's worth having the influence. It's worth influencing our neighbors into desiring a relationship with Jesus. But here's the thing. You can't have influence without investment. Without investment, there can be no influence. So we have to invest by being intentional with our opportunities with our neighbors. And we'll discover that as we start to develop friendships, in your notes, we'll discover stories. We can discover stories. See, we need to have conversations that show the people next to us, hey, I care about you. I want to know about you. I want to know about your past. I want to know about your future. And this might require us to open up about ourselves and share our own stories. Jesus was incredible at discovering stories. And there's a story in John chapter 4. It's about the woman at the well. Maybe you've heard this before. It's an incredible account, and there's so many great things you can take away from it. But we're just going to talk about one part of it today. But Jesus, he goes to this well to get a drink of water, and there's a Samaritan woman there. And he starts to talk to her. And he starts to just say all kinds of weird things to her about himself. He tells her, look, if you knew who I was, you wouldn't even be here getting water, because I'm living water, and I can change your life more than anything else you know. And she's kind of confused. First off, she's like, why are you even talking to me? You're a Jewish man. I'm a Samaritan woman. And I don't know if you know this, Jesus, but Jews and Samaritans don't get along. But he says, listen, I know about you. I know your story. I know that you've been living a life of shame and of guilt. I know that the man you're staying with right now isn't even your husband. Now, I'm not saying to go call your neighbors an adulterer. Please don't do that. I don't need that on me. But what Jesus did is he spoke into this woman's story and said, look, I care about it. I care about the story you've had, and I want to give you a new story moving forward. And this woman was so blown away that she ran back into town. She left her bucket there. She runs back into town. She tells everybody, come and meet this man who knows me. And the scripture says that many left the town, came out to meet Jesus, and believed in who he was. So your neighbors have a story. Your neighbors have a family history. They have past hurts. They have needs right now. They have anxieties and worries about the future. But you have a story too. You have a story that begins and ends with the hope of Jesus Christ, the one who came and died for us, the one who paid the ultimate sacrifice in love for us. And we get to share that with people. See, we talked a few weeks ago about being compassionate and meeting the needs around us, but we'll never know the needs of our neighbors until we discover their stories. I was at a friend's house just yesterday, and he was telling me about one of his neighbors that lives across the street. And he said, yeah, the craziest thing happened a few days ago. He said, this is somebody I've developed a relationship with over years, and I've tried to talk to him about, Christianity and about Jesus, and he's always been very standoffish. He doesn't want to talk about it. So we just hang out and we talk about other stuff. He said, but just the other day, I was outside cooking, I was grilling, and I see him across the street, and I said, hey, why don't you come over, hang out for a minute while I'm grilling? So his friend comes over, and he says, I'm actually glad that you called me over. I've got a God question for you. And my friend's kind of like, wow, okay. I have no idea how I'm going to answer this. And he just prayed, God, just help me answer this question, whatever it is. And his neighbor starts to tell the story. He says, well, I'm a manager at a restaurant, and the other day a customer came in, and as we were talking, they said, I just really think that God has blessed you with the gift of being a people person, of just making people comfortable. And my friend's like, wow, that's really cool. He said, yeah, but that's not it. 2 days later, another customer came in, and as we were talking, said, hey, I really feel like God has just gifted you with being able to make people comfortable, and that's awesome, and you should use that. And again, my friend's like, that's amazing. Well, that's not it. Really? He says, yeah. He says, one of my best friends is now dating a Christian woman, and so he's reading through the Bible, and he's talking to me about the Bible, and I just don't know how I'm supposed to deal with any of this. I've never believed in this whole God thing, and every Christian I've ever known has just been a terrible person. I don't know what to feel about this. And my friend just kind of smiled. And he was able to have this amazing conversation right there in his garage about who Jesus really is like and what a church really looks like. And they were able to pour into some passages from the Bible that he was struggling with, and he was able to explain it to him. And he says, look, this wasn't me. I'm not a smart person. This was all God. And I wish I could say that the story ends with his neighbor, coming to Christ and accepting that right there in the moment. He didn't. But it's very clear that God is working in his life. And my friend got to be a part of that just from being a good neighbor. And I asked him, I said, well, what do you do now? He said, well, I'm going to have him over for dinner in a week so we can follow up. Because that's the last point in your notes. You have to determine your next steps. See, when you looked at my map, you saw that I knew that the people next to me were from Seattle, and I knew that because I went over and we talked with them when they first moved in. We weren't going to make the same mistake as the people on the left. But we didn't figure out what we needed to do next to foster that relationship. So we need to be praying that God would give us clear direction about how to meet and be with our neighbors. Take those 9 boxes, put it somewhere where you're going to see it. Pray over your neighborhood. Pray for that direction. I found that as more time goes by, I reminisce about the neighborhood I grew up with a little more often. So I grew up on a great street. All the kids played together. We played football and basketball and soccer. When the sun went down, we played kick the can. We ran through everybody's yard, except for Mr. Roberts. He didn't touch his grass. I still remember that. One beating is enough, right? But all the parents, they all hung out too, and they knew that everybody was watching over the kids. They didn't have to worry. When my mom got sick with cancer, one of the other women that lived down the road was a nurse, and she would come in and into the house, and she would help my mom out and help to just be there with her. And when my dad had to take her to doctor's appointments, some of the other parents would take the kids, and we'd hang out, and they'd help us to kind of forget about what was going on. And after my mom passed away, I could often find my dad in our next-door neighbor's garage, just hanging out with them, just talking. They were just there for each other. And as I prepared for this week, and I thought, how can I be a better neighbor? I just thought, why can't I just do that? Why am I making it so complicated? Why can't my family be the family that is the catalyst in our neighborhood to inspire that kind of environment and that kind of community? And why not you? Why not right now? The people that live around you, they want that same thing. So I think there's a few quick steps we'll go through that we can all do. The first is to build. Commit to building relationships with your neighbors. If you can't fill out those boxes, there's your start. Rachel and I said we're going to spend more time out on our front porch instead of in the backyard behind the fence so that we have more face-to-face opportunities. And if you don't really know where to start, I want to show this to you guys. You put that up on the screen. This is called The Art of Neighboring, Building Genuine Relationships. This is not a Troy Schmidt book, so it's not free, but it's still a really good read. You can get it on Kindle for like $2 or Amazon it to your house within a day. But check that out. Look for some ways to just be a different kind of neighbor. The second thing we can do is help. Be compassionate. Use the skills and the gifts that you have to minister to your neighbors. If you know something about air conditioning and you see that your neighbor's AC is out and you can fix that for them, you are doing more ministering than anybody up here is doing, okay? We can help. Next, we can invite. Bring somebody here with you. Like I said at the beginning of service, there's people that need to hear the things that you guys are hearing every Sunday. And please don't think that your neighbors seeing you get in the car on a Sunday morning counts as an invite, okay? Now, they know where we're going. They could follow us here. It doesn't take a lot of effort to just say, hey, I don't know if you go to church, if you're looking for church, but I'd love for you to come hang out with me on a Sunday morning. Despite the kind of crazy teaching pastor, it's a really fun place to be. We can grab lunch afterwards, get to know each other, get past the awkwardness. Your personal invites go so much further than any flyer in the mail. And then lastly, just be willing to share. Share your resources, share your time, and share your story about how Jesus has impacted your life. Church, we want to be a community of good neighbors. But not because we want to be more popular or we want to be liked or have more social media followers or anything like that. We want to be good neighbors because we want to bring glory to the name of Jesus Christ. And we want people to seek after that relationship, and we want God to use us as light in our neighborhoods. Let's pray. Jesus, thank you so much that you chose us to be in the places we are, in the time that we are. That you've gifted us with unique personalities and unique stories so that we can go and we can show our neighbors what the love and grace and mercy and truth of your Son Jesus really looks like. God, help us to be bold, help us to be willing, guide us, go before us into our neighborhoods, and just prepare a path for us to make a difference around us. Amen.